what positions do the Saints draft best and worst? Last week we took a deep dive into every draft pick the Saints have made since Jeff Ireland got here in 2015. So now let's take an overall look and see if we think they're actually better or worse at drafting, and should it affect their strategy going into this year's draft?
I got a few here. I got a few candidates. Safety they've been really good at, but they've been really good at it after day one. Marcus Williams was a second rounder. Von Bell was a second rounder. C.J. Gardner-Johnson was a fourth rounder. Jordan Howden a fifth rounder. So that's a lot of hits with good currency. Defensive tackle pretty good. David Onyemata, big hit in the fourth round. Brzee, a good first-round pick. Rankin's a decent first-round pick. Tyler Davison in the fifth. The guys that have meant the most, though, cornerback has Lattimore and Adebo, Alante Taylor, P.J. Williams. Receiver has Michael Thomas, Chris Olave, big hits with big value. That's the discussion for me. Traquan, Kwan, A.T. Perry. Man, I think I'm going to go with corner.
Corner? I mean, I think
DB for sure.
Yeah, it's DB for sure. For me, it's safety. I think safety is their top position. And I don't even know if that's the drafting of. I think it might be just like the development too. And their coaching at that position has just been so strong just throughout this whole tenure. DA was coaching there. Chris Richard's a good coach. They have good coaches there now with Marcus Robertson. And they've just done a really good job of coaching at that position. Joe Woods is also a DB's coach by trade. He's there. I think that the development has just been something that's been really, really good at that spot. But I'm with you. I think it's either that or cornerback. Cornerback, I give safety a slight lean just because the assets haven't necessarily, like Jordan Howden is a fifth-round hit. Yeah. Is kind of a big one for me. And that kind of tilts it a little bit, but I can't argue against it either way. Running back might end up being one too if Kendrick Miller ends up developing.
I kind of had a dividing line. The other one I had above the dividing line was guard and center. They've only drafted 4 of them in the Ireland era. One was Eric McCoy, one of their bigger hits. Ruiz, not bad. Will Clapp, good hit in the 7th round. Nick Saldivari, the jury's still out. So it's kind of funny. There's a small sample size. I think what's most important, though, what you're judged on, what you get hired and fired for probably is what you do with the primo picks. And I think everyone watching this discussion is probably going to say they miss on defensive ends. They miss on offensive tackles. They've definitely, with primo picks, they hit on Lattimore, they hit on Thomas, they hit on Olave. So that gives a little boost to those positions.
How much do we drop wide receiver because of Traquan Smith? Because I think if Traquan didn't exist, I think you're kind of maybe putting wide receiver near the top of the list because the Olave, Mike Thomas duo. Yeah. And then the other guys were picked late enough that I think it kind of washes
Baker
out a
doesn't
little
matter
bit.
to me. He might as well have been undrafted.
Yeah.
A.T. Perry looks like
Is
an early
another
hit.
Yeah.
No, I my very unofficial ranking system that I had here to take notes to have this conversation was I have all caps for the big hits. I have italics for the misses, and I just have Traquan in regular print. I mean, I wish he was better, but I don't put him in the he takes away category either, really.
I think wide receiver is kind of like a sneaky candidate for the best one here.
Yeah.
Because it is like you have Mike Thomas is arguably the best pick in team history. Now, the re-signing, you can go with whatever you want on that, but the first draftable years, the first rookie contract, unbelievable value for a second-round pick. Then, the injuries and all that stuff come, and now Chris Olave is on that same trajectory. We might kind of be hating a little bit by going default DB. Like wide receiver might. I could be convinced. Someone could talk me into wide receiver. Like I'm on the cusp of buying that argument.
Well, do you think what kind of grade do you give Olave? Do you give that an overachieving grade, or do you give that he was worth the 11th pick in the draft grade?
I think they made an aggressive pick and have gotten aggressively good results.
Yeah.
So I think it's met it, but the expectations are really high. It's not like he kind of backed into it. Marshawn kind of met the same thing with a really high pick at that spot. And
same spot.
He met it. Yeah, he met it as well. I think the expectations are sky high at that spot. So
Thomas is a bigger hit than Adebo. So receivers ahead of corner for sure. Yeah, I'm not giving Alante Taylor and P.J. Williams enough credit to move it ahead of the Michael Thomas pick. Yeah.
Where are you at? Which way? If you got to go safety, wide receiver, or cornerback?
It's easy. It's wide receiver.
You think it's wide receiver?
It's wide receiver, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, it's definitely wide receiver. Based on Mike, based on Chris, and then even the people that the Saints have provided to the league, like Brandon Coleman, it's wide receiver.
What's really interesting about wide receiver if you throw Rashid Shaheed and Deontay Hardy into the mix,
and if we're
killing that position.
And if we're giving credit for Jordan Howden as a
even
fifth-round
Tommy
pick,
Lee Lewis.
You got A.T. Perry is the 6th.
Yeah.
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 What's really interesting about receiver is they had a huge drought where between Michael Thomas and Olave, Traquan was the only one they took. for however many years that was. And I remember doing a story one year where they were they got down to being the last team in the league that went like 3 straight drafts without drafting a receiver. Like they went 3 straight drafts without drafting a receiver. Only 5 over those 9 years is kind of a low number. So we'll see if they get back in that number this year.
Even look at the inconsistency in quarterback play, and the receivers have still been able to produce. I feel like they're able to overcome that and make do with what they have. So speaking of receivers, let's go on the next top picks that the Saints have had since 2015.
Yeah, I mean, you got Alvin, Ryan.
4 different positions.
Ryan Ramczyk, Mike Thomas, Marshawn Lattimore. I mean, it's spreading the board here. But here's the thing. These are at the beginning, this cluster of success in the draft. Like they were all, those 2 drafts, I think, were just so foundational for them. And every time we're talking about a really great pick, they're kind of coming from those. Now you got Chris Olave in the mix as well. And hopefully we kind of start to see a little bit of a trend back toward that this year with whatever they do at 14. But yeah, they were outstanding there for a period of time. But these were the guys that I had at the top of the list. I kind of feel like I should have put Mike first. I feel like Mike might be the best.
We had
pick.
that discussion via text. It's like, and also you did a different thing when you graded, because some of their guys like Trey Hendrickson and Alex Anzalone didn't get a lot of points for you because it didn't happen with the Saints.
Yeah,
but if you're doing it is you just made the pick at the time, and once the scouts leave the room on draft night, anything that happens after that is no longer their fault. Thomas is the number 1 pick on that.
Thomas, and look, I had Trey Hendrickson kind of down a little bit. Like under that criteria, he's higher, but I feel like it had to happen with the Saints because it's not a great pick for the Saints.
Yeah, you also do need to know what your coaches want to work with.
Yeah, they gotta have success here a little bit. So, but yeah, if we're just grading the scouting, the scouting of this kind of shakes up the list a little bit. And I think
Thomas is definitely number 1.
Yeah, Thomas or Alvin. I think Alvin's still there.
Yeah,
Alvin's still there. Like he's had more longevity. It's kind of, I don't know. Mike was the greatest of all time for a period of time though. So, I don't know. I don't know how to grade it, but I ended up going Alvin first. I feel shaky on it, but now I'm talking myself back into Alvin. Maybe I should have moved Mike up ahead of Ramczyk and then slid Ramczyk over 1. But again, I feel like Ramczyk had that little bit of longevity. So like I was just kind of doing it that way a little bit. Marshawn at 4 feels like a good spot for him.
I think the first position that you hit twice on that list might have been corner, Lattimore, and then a Debo. No, Thomas at Olave, because you had Olave 6th. So
my thing with Lattimore, and I feel like you could make an argument that he should be higher, but I feel like Lattimore had the potential to be, and this isn't necessarily scouting or drafting or scouting or whatever, but I feel like Lattimore had the potential to be potentially like the greatest of all time, and it just never got there. Like the practice habits weren't right for a while. Those have shifted in recent times. You've seen a little bit more consistency on the field, but you haven't seen the consistency with staying on the field now. So it's just kind of been like a cornucopia of just minor disappointments where he's still great, but there's still a little bit of something, pulling him down just a little bit every single year. And I just feel like he never got on the right side of that. And even if he does now, I feel like age is going to start to prevent that a little bit. So this kind of might be the last year for him to have a Revis type season. And I don't know if that's going to happen.
One thing that just dawned on me, and this isn't either a plus or a minus, but I know people hate on the Saints when they draft somebody who has injuries in their history and then they deal with injuries, that Marshawn Lattimore fell to them because of that like hamstring injury. And Ryan Ramczyk had the, was it knee? I don't think it was knee. Was it back? I don't know why I'm drawing a blank now. But those were 2 guys that fell to the Saints in part because people had medical grades on them. And for a long time, that wasn't a problem. So sometimes you're cherry picking on whether you should have taken a guy who had an injury history or not. And, although now it has come back full circle on them.
All right, now let's take a look at the worst picks. So we have Stephon Anthony, Tommy Stevens, Rick Leonard, Gary Grayson. I mean,
one position is on there twice. Yeah. Does that mean quarterback is the answer to this question?
It could be. It absolutely is. They haven't drafted anybody that's made it to year 2.
You had Haener and Book, 4 quarterbacks.
They haven't, and Haener will. Haener's going to make it. He'll be the first one, but they have not had a quarterback make it to year 2 on that initial contract. Now they've had guys leave and come back, get cut and come back, go to the practice squad. They haven't had anybody stay on the 53-man roster for 2 seasons in this era, in the Sean Payton era. It's a position that they have not drafted well. But look, that's probably everybody. But the thing that I don't know, I guess would make it stand out a little bit is that they're was an organizational reputation of having quarterback mastery in their pocket. And
we just saw it today when Sean Payton traded for Zach Wilson that everyone gives him credit for tutoring young quarterbacks.
But where?
Tony Romo and then ...
Drew Brees, I guess. But I think Drew was going to be great regardless. I think Drew was going to be great independent of it. I think him and Sean were the perfect marriage, and I'm not taking anything away from anybody. I think them finding each other probably helped them both get to, the heights that they're at now. But I think that Sean probably would have been a good coach without Drew. Yeah. Drew was going to be great without Sean.
Yeah, it's not to take away from Sean Payton. It just plain didn't happen here. Doesn't mean it couldn't happen. He didn't have a lot to work with. What's interesting is if you split up defensive end and outside linebacker being the tweener position that like fits a 3-4 better than a 4-3, outside linebackers are worse. I have Davis Toll and Haoli Kakaha there. You could argue that Zach Bond and Caden Ellis also belong in that category, although they had a vision to move them to linebacker. But tight ends, they've only drafted 2. Adam Troutman, they paid a lot for. Alize Mack, they paid nothing for. Quarterback, I had near the bottom of the list. But I think the 2 everyone's here to hear us talk about is offensive tackle and defensive end. Are they good or bad at drafting offensive tackles and defensive ends?
So here's my take on this. I don't. They haven't hit enough, but I think so. There's an answer, and then there's the deeper logical. Let's pick this apart and get to the truth of it.
That's what we do here, right?
Yeah, they're bad at they're bad at drafting them. Now, everything we're going to say from here, there's going to be some idiot that's like, stop making excuses. Nobody's making excuses. We're just trying to explain what they do here, and I think the reason that they haven't hit on these picks is because of where they have been drafting. And I think when you have to get a defensive end or a starting left tackle, those are usually spots that if you aren't drafting in the top 10, your odds of getting a sure thing are extremely low. So you have to start
There's no
taking
Myles Garrett or Joe Thomas on their register because they never picked first or second.
So you have to start taking risks. And then you're making trades for guys and you're taking risks on people because you have to fill that need, because you don't want to go into free agency and pay top dollar for people that underperform. So you're trying to build a team, and by trying to build a team, you're drafting these guys. And I think when you start drafting people 11, 12, 19, where did they pick Marcus Davenport? 14th? 14th. And Peyton Turner was in the 20s.
29th.
Yeah, so when you start drafting people in those ranges, you're taking significant risks, the more so you go down. So like Trevor Penning's a risk at 19. He has somebody, you're looking at the tape, you see the traits, but you're projecting it, and then you project it, and the projection's wrong. And that's a really hard thing to try to figure out. I understand how they get it wrong. The fact is, though, they still have gotten those things wrong. But I don't think that it's like you're bad at drafting because you miss on a pass rusher in the 20s. Like, I think it's just really hard to draft a pass rusher in the 20s that's actually productive. So now you have the choice between going for upside or someone that just doesn't have very much ceiling. And if you're making a pick, the Saints tend to like upside with their prospects more so than just like, this is what it's going to be. They're fine. We'll take them. I think they always favor the upside. I think when you chase the upside a little bit, you miss, but you can't really get a big hit if you don't chase the upside. So it's kind of a either or proposition. They've gotten it wrong too often. Getting it wrong, I think, is extremely, extremely set back this team. But I don't think it's an easy thing to have success in that range at those positions.
All right, there are 2 different conversations. So let's start with defensive end. Davenport in the first round paid a lot. Used 2 first-round picks there, got him at 14. Turner, the other first-rounder, 29th. Were they just medical misses, do you think? Both of them? Just medical? I mean, Davenport had the personality traits where his confidence waned and stuff like that, but those aren't necessarily huge scouting misses to me either.
No, like, they aren't.
The risk was medical, and they came up, whatever. They rolled 7. They rolled craps both times, but
yeah, I think on
they had good visions for how they would fit this defense. I'm tough. I'm asking the question, not making a statement.
I'm reluctant to say this because it could be taken as like mean-spirited. I feel like Davenport was partially a personality miss.
Yeah.
And I think the personality with the adversity, I think the concoction of the two, it became so much worse. And yeah,
I don't feel that way about Turner. We compare them a lot.
I don't.
But man,
No, I think Turner's more
Turner's keeps getting hurt.
Turner's a medical miss and bad luck. I feel like Davenport was medical bad luck, and then the personality, I think, just kind of when adversity hit on the field, off the field, on social media, I feel like it just kind of torpedoed him really quickly.
To be fair, though, Davenport is also in another tier with talent. Like
Absolutely.
we have not seen Turner reach.
We haven't seen Turner on the field
had
enough
the
to even
talent
know.
to be one of the biggest hits on this list.
Davenport has the talent to be one of the best defensive ends like in team history or whatever. Like on the list, not at the top of the list, but like in the conversation, it just never happened for him. But the sheer talent was there. I don't even know what Turner's talent is, honestly.
Exactly.
I mean, we've seen little glimmers of it, but he's
I don't
just
hate
been
that
off the
pick.
field
I've
so
always
much.
said, just for his own sanity and like to have a fair discussion about him, he should have been picked 40th. He should have not been picked 29th. There's such a stigma. If he would pick 40th, everybody would have been, I love it. I love the value they got from that Houston edge rusher in round 2 because he was a first rounder. He was judged different. But I asked that question because Trey Hendrickson was obviously a scouting hit. They didn't know what to do with him coaching wise, and he did take a long time to develop. Al-Qadim Muhammad, same thing. He succeeded somewhere else. And Isaiah Foskey, the jury's still out. Those are the only 5 defensive ends they've drafted over the last 9 years. None of them is a Stephon Anthony or like they have not proven they don't know what they're looking for in a defensive end. They just haven't made it work. Offensive tackle is a little different. Penning so far has been a big miss. Rick Leonard's one of the biggest misses they ever had in round 4. Ramczyk, a huge hit. Pete somewhere in between. Landon Young somewhere in between. Anything, Ramczyk, Pete, first rounders. Penning, first rounders. 3 first rounders. Rick Leonard, Landon Young. The only 5 offensive tackles they've taken. Anything that adds to your anything they should have learned from those 5 picks, anything that helps inform your decision when you're almost certainly going to pick an offensive tackle this week.
No.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Yeah.
I mean, get the sure thing. That's the only thing I can say about it is get the sure thing. That's the thing that I think I've learned from it is that you were chasing something with Penning. I mean, Rick Leonard's just like it was an athletic talent projection, and then you're what? It was Landon Young who was the other one, and then Pete. Pete was kind of a sure thing, and the floor on that was fine, like to a degree. I think
do have to wonder what would have happened if Pete just was left tackle, and they had an opening at left tackle, and that's the position he played in high school and college. And
that's a fair thought experiment. Yeah, I mean it's kind of interesting to think about actually. I think he was fine. I think the floor on Pete, even when Pete was a fan base pariah, like I thought he was still okay. It was just like the way he lost was horrible. Like he never had just like he was never losing, 21-20. The score, like the final score when he gave up a pressure, it was like losing like 50-10. Like it just always looks so bad.
The 5 worst things that ever happened to Drew Brees, they happened behind him. It was like also the worst moments too. But you're right on the sure thing. I mean, we talked about like how we like a guy like Tyler Guyton, or there's the BYU guy, Kingsley. So like if you get into that range where you're taking him at 29 or 32, or Patrick Paul, is that the guy from here? If that's the offensive tackles they're taking, the degree of missing goes way up. If they take one at 14, especially with the assortment of choices that they have this year, I believe they can hit on that pick. And this history does not, the Trevor Penning miss does not make me think that they are bound to miss on these absolute blue chippers they have to choose from this year.
If they choose to wait to address that need at 45, or if they trade back, they deserve zero grace for it if it goes wrong. Because the evidence is there, and you're choosing. And I think at 14 this year, the guy you're getting in most other drafts, even if it's the 4th, 5th one on the list, typically that guy's going to be 1 or 2 in any other draft. It's that deep this year. And if you are choosing to dabble in the lower poll, the Trevor Penning level poll, the Andrews Pete level poll, like you deserve whatever happens. Like it's almost I mean you can't do it. Like I just don't think you can do it. I think that's the lesson that's learned here.
The only position that we didn't go through was linebacker. It had the worst Stephon Anthony, your absolute worst pick, but had some hits in Pete Werner, Caden Ellis, Anzalone for another team, DeMarco Jackson, so for a day 3 pick. Zach Bond didn't reach his potential, so I have it square in the middle of these.
Yeah,
lists.
and I think overall, linebacker is one of those positions where there just really aren't good players anymore. Like there really aren't good linebackers anymore. Like they're far and few between. There's the Mario Davises of the world, but I think arguably Linebacker is the worst position in the NFL, like top to bottom. I don't think that there's a lot of very good players at that position.